Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the USS Defiant, watching the stars through the main view screen. The ship had been traveling through the outer rim of human space for 3 weeks, exploring new systems and looking for signs of intelligent life. Jake was a veteran of many deep space missions, but something about this particular journey felt different. His crew had been picking up strange energy readings for the past 2 days, readings that didn't match any known natural phenomena. Lieutenant Amy Carter, the ship's tactical officer, turned from her station with a concerned expression. She was young but experienced, having served on 3 different vessels before being assigned to the Defiant. Amy had short blonde hair and sharp blue eyes that missed nothing during combat situations. "Captain, I'm detecting multiple contacts on long-range sensors," she reported. "They're moving in formation and heading directly toward us." Chief Engineer Rick Thompson looked up from his diagnostic panel. Rick was a big man with calloused hands who had spent 20 years keeping human ships running in the darkest corners of space. He understood machines better than most people understood other humans. "Sir, whatever those ships are using for propulsion, it's unlike anything in our databases," he said. "The energy signatures are completely foreign." Jake nodded and turned to his communications officer. Lieutenant Lisa Rodriguez was sitting at her station, her dark hair pulled back in a regulation bun. She had joined the crew 6 months ago and had quickly proven herself to be excellent at her job. Lisa had a gift for languages and had successfully established first contact with 2 different alien species during her career. "Lisa, any response to our standard greeting frequencies?" Jake asked. "Nothing yet, Captain," Lisa replied, adjusting her equipment. "But I'm detecting some kind of transmission between the unknown vessels. It's using a communication method I've never seen before. The signals seem to be carried on some kind of crystalline matrix." The bridge fell silent as everyone focused on their duties. Jake had commanded the Defiant for 5 years, and his crew trusted him completely. They had faced dangerous situations before, but encountering a completely unknown alien technology always created tension. The ship's other officers continued their work, monitoring systems and preparing for whatever might happen next. "Captain," Amy said, her voice tight with concern, "the contacts are now within visual range, putting them on the main screen." The view screen flickered and then displayed the most beautiful and terrifying sight Jake had ever seen. 7 ships moved through space in perfect formation, each one looking like it had been carved from a single piece of crystal. The vessels were long and sleek, with surfaces that seemed to shimmer and change color as they moved. Strange energy patterns flowed across their hulls like living lightning, and each ship was surrounded by what appeared to be a translucent barrier that pulsed with soft light. "Those are warships," Amy said quietly. "I can see weapon ports along their hulls, and those energy barriers look like some kind of shielding system," Rick whistled softly. "The power readings from those shields are incredible. They're generating more energy than our entire ship uses in a month." Jake studied the alien vessels carefully. In his experience, ships that beautiful were usually designed by species that considered warfare to be an art form. Such species were often very dangerous because they combined advanced technology with a warrior culture that valued honor and victory above all else. "Any change in their course or speed?" he asked. "No, sir," Amy replied. "They're maintaining formation and continuing to approach at the same rate. At current speed, they'll be within weapons range in approximately 15 minutes. "Captain," Lisa said suddenly, "I'm receiving a transmission. It's coming through on multiple frequencies simultaneously, and somehow my equipment is translating it automatically." Jake straightened in his command chair. "Put it through the main speakers." The voice that filled the bridge was deep and resonant, carrying an unmistakable tone of superiority and contempt. "Primitive species, we are the Zephyrians of the Galactic Dominion. We have conquered 17 star systems and defeated countless inferior civilizations. Your crude vessels and backward technology are no match for our advanced capabilities." The transmission continued without pause. "I am High Commander Veltar of the Zephyrian Imperial Fleet. Our sensors indicate that your ships are equipped with primitive projectile weapons and basic energy systems. Such weapons are relics of a bygone era. Our adaptive shield technology has withstood the fury of 1,000 worlds and can deflect any attack your species might attempt. Jake felt his jaw tighten. He had dealt with arrogant aliens before, but the casual dismissal in the Zephyrian commander's voice was particularly irritating. The enemy was not just threatening humanity, they were laughing at them. Your resistance will be brief and futile. The voice continued. Surrender now, and we may allow you to serve as laborers in our growing empire. Refuse, and your ships will be destroyed and your crews will be taken as prisoners. You have exactly 10 minutes to make your decision. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in complete silence. Jake looked around at his crew and saw the same mixture of anger and determination on every face. These aliens had made a serious mistake by underestimating humanity. Well, Jake said finally, I suppose we should show them what human hospitality looks like. He turned to Amy. Sound general quarters and prepare all weapon systems. Contact the Ranger and the Sentinel. Tell them we're about to have company. The klaxons began to wail throughout the ship as the crew prepared for battle. Jake Morrison had no idea that he was about to participate in a fight that would change the way the galaxy viewed humanity forever. High Commander Veltar stood in the command center of his flagship, watching the primitive human vessels through his main display screen. The 3 human ships looked crude and ugly compared to the elegant crystal design of Zephyrian warships. Their hulls were made of simple metal, and their weapon systems appeared to be nothing more than basic energy cannons and missile launchers. Veltar had seen similar technology on dozens of other worlds, and it had never posed any real threat to his fleet. Sub-Commander Kethra, Veltar said to his second-in-command, begin the attack sequence. Use minimum power settings on our weapons. These humans do not deserve the full might of our arsenal. Kethra was a skilled warrior who had served under Veltar for many years. She had participated in the conquest of 7 different star systems and had never seen their shields fail against any enemy weapon. Yes, Commander, she replied, her fingers dancing across the control panel. All ships are ready to engage. Our adaptive barriers are at full strength. The Zephyrian ships moved forward in perfect formation, their crystalline hulls gleaming in the starlight. Each vessel was surrounded by a shimmering energy field that pulsed with different colors as it automatically adjusted to potential threats. The shield technology was the pride of the Zephyrian military, capable of learning from each attack and becoming stronger with every shot it absorbed. Aboard the USS Defiant, Jake Morrison watched the enemy fleet approach with grim determination. The alien ships were beautiful, but he had learned long ago that beauty in warfare usually meant danger. All ships, this is Morrison, he said into his communicator. Remember, we're not just fighting for ourselves. We're fighting for every human colony in this sector. Captain Steve Collins of the USS Ranger responded first. Understood, Jake. My crew is ready for whatever these aliens can throw at us. Captain Maria Santos of the USS Sentinel was equally determined. The Sentinel stands ready, Captain Morrison. Let's show these invaders what human courage looks like. The battle began when the Zephyrian ships opened fire with their plasma lance weapons. Beams of pure energy streaked across space, designed to overload human ship systems and disable their vessels without causing too much damage. The Zephyrians preferred to capture enemy ships intact so they could study the technology and use it to improve their own systems. Jake gripped his command chair as the first energy beam struck the Defiant's shields. The ship shook violently, and sparks flew from several control panels. Damage report, he called out. Rick Thompson was already running diagnostics on his engineering systems. Forward shields are down to 60%, Captain. That was just one hit from their weakest weapon. Amy Carter was studying her tactical display with growing concern. Sir, their weapons are more powerful than anything we've encountered before. If they're using minimum power settings, we're in serious trouble. The human ships began to return fire, launching missiles and energy beams at the approaching Zephyrian vessels. The attacks struck the alien shields and simply disappeared, absorbed by the shimmering barriers without causing any visible damage. The Zephyrian shield technology analyzed each incoming projectile and energy beam, learning its characteristics and adapting to make the barriers more effective against similar attacks. Veltar watched the human weapons strike his ships with complete indifference. The primitive energy attacks were exactly what he had expected from such a backward species. "Pathetic," he said to Kethra. "Their weapons are even weaker than I anticipated. Increase power to 70% and target their weapon systems." The second wave of Zephyrian attacks was devastating. Plasma beams tore through the human ship's shields like they were made of paper, and several missiles found their targets despite the best efforts of the human point defense systems. The USS Ranger took a direct hit to its main engine, causing the ship to lose power and begin drifting helplessly through space. "Ranger is dead in the water," Amy reported. "They're running on emergency power only?" Jake felt his anger growing as he watched his fellow humans struggle against the superior alien technology. The Zephyrians were toying with them, using just enough power to disable their ships without destroying them completely. It was the kind of arrogant behavior that made Jake want to fight even harder. "All ships concentrate fire on the lead vessel," he ordered. "Maybe we can overwhelm their shields with focused attacks." The remaining human ships turned all their weapons on Veltar's flagship, launching everything they had at the massive crystalline vessel. Missiles, energy beams, and plasma charges struck the Zephyrian shields in rapid succession, creating a brilliant light show as the barriers absorbed and deflected every attack. Veltar laughed as he watched the desperate human assault. "Look how they struggle," he said to his crew. "They fire everything they have, and our shields grow stronger with each shot. This is why the Zephyrian Empire will rule the galaxy." The alien shields pulsed brighter as they absorbed the human attacks, the adaptive technology learning from each impact and becoming more resistant to similar weapons. What the humans thought was their strongest assault was actually making their enemy more powerful, but Jake Morrison was not the kind of man who gave up easily. As he watched his weapons fail against the alien barriers, he began to notice something strange. The ship's automated point defense turrets were firing small tungsten rounds at incoming missiles, and those rounds seemed to be causing tiny fluctuations in the Zephyrian shields. "Amy," he said quietly, "are you seeing what I'm seeing?" Amy studied her sensors more carefully. "Captain, the enemy shields appear to be designed specifically for energy-based attacks. They're adaptive and learning, but they seem to have some kind of limitation." Rick looked up from his engineering station. "Sir, our point defense systems are purely kinetic. They fire solid metal projectiles, not energy beams." Jake felt a spark of hope ignite in his chest. Maybe these arrogant aliens had made a mistake after all. Jake Morrison stared at his tactical display, his mind racing as he processed what he was seeing. The Zephyrian shields were absorbing every energy attack his ships could throw at them, but the small tungsten rounds from the point defense systems were creating ripples in those same barriers. It was a tiny effect, barely noticeable unless someone was looking for it, but it was there. "Amy, I need you to run a full analysis on those point defense impacts," Jake said, his voice tight with concentration. "Compare the shield response to energy weapons versus kinetic projectiles." Amy's fingers flew across her console as she pulled up the battle data. Her tactical training had taught her to look for patterns in enemy defenses, and what she saw made her eyes widen. "Captain, you're right. The shields are adapting to our energy weapons and becoming more resistant with each hit. But the kinetic impacts from our point defense guns are causing consistent disruption patterns." Rick Thompson had been listening to the conversation while trying to keep the ship's systems running under heavy fire. His engineering background made him think about problems differently than the military officers. "Sir, what if their shield technology was designed to fight enemies who use energy weapons exclusively? They might have never encountered simple kinetic attacks before." Jake felt his pulse quicken. Throughout human history, the most advanced civilizations had sometimes been defeated by simpler, more direct approaches. The Zephyrians had conquered 17 star systems, probably facing enemies who used the same type of advanced energy weapons they used themselves. But humans had never completely abandoned older technologies, even when newer ones became available. "Lisa, get me a direct channel to the Ranger and the Sentinel," Jake ordered. "Emergency frequency." Lisa's hands moved quickly across her communications panel. "Channel open, Captain." "Steve, Maria, this is Jake. Stop all energy weapon fire immediately. Switch to kinetic weapons only. Railguns, missile warheads, anything that throws solid metal at the enemy." Captain Collins' voice came through the speakers, filled with confusion. "Jake, our kinetic weapons are much weaker than our energy systems." "Are you sure about this?" "Trust me, Steve. Their shields are designed to handle energy attacks. Let's see how they deal with good old-fashioned bullets." The change in tactics was immediate and dramatic. The USS Defiant's main railgun system came online, charging up to fire solid tungsten slugs at tremendous velocity. The USS Sentinel, which had been built for planetary assault operations, activated its massive rotary cannons that could fire thousands of depleted uranium rounds per minute. Even the damaged USS Ranger managed to bring its magnetic accelerator online, preparing to launch steel core projectiles at the enemy. Veltar watched from his command center as the human ships suddenly stopped firing their energy weapons. For a moment he thought they might be surrendering, but then his sensors detected new activity. "What are they doing now?" he asked Kethra. "Commander, they appear to be activating some kind of primitive kinetic weapon systems," Kethra reported, her voice filled with amusement. "They're preparing to throw metal objects at us." Veltar laughed loudly, and his laughter was echoed by the other officers on the bridge. "Metal objects? They think they can damage our shields with chunks of metal? This is even more pathetic than I expected. Let them waste their ammunition. It will make their defeat even more humiliating." The first railgun shot from the Defiant struck Veltar's flagship with the force of a small meteor. The tungsten slug, traveling at a significant fraction of the speed of light, hit the Zephyrian shield and did something that no energy weapon had managed to do. It punched straight through. The silence on the Zephyrian bridge was deafening. Officers stared at their displays in disbelief as alarms began to sound throughout the ship. The projectile had not only penetrated the shield, it had torn a hole in the ship's hull and caused significant structural damage. "That's impossible," Veltar whispered, his face pale with shock. "Our shields have never failed, never." Kethra was frantically checking her sensor readings, trying to understand what had happened. "Commander, the projectile had no energy signature for our shields to analyze and adapt to. It was just mass and velocity. Our adaptive barriers couldn't process it." The human assault continued with devastating effect. The USS Sentinel's rotary cannons opened fire, sending a stream of depleted uranium rounds toward the Zephyrian fleet. Each bullet that struck a shield passed through as if the barrier didn't exist, tearing into the crystalline hulls beyond. The USS Ranger, despite its damaged condition, managed to fire its magnetic accelerator, launching a steel core projectile that completely destroyed a smaller Zephyrian vessel. Jake watched the battle unfold with grim satisfaction. The beautiful alien ships that had seemed so invincible moments before were now taking serious damage from weapons that the Zephyrians had dismissed as primitive. "Amy, target their weapon systems. Let's see how well they fight when they can't. Shoot back." Amy coordinated the attack with practiced precision. The human ships focused their kinetic fire on the Zephyrian weapon ports, using solid projectiles to destroy the delicate energy systems that powered their plasma lances. Without their weapons, the alien ships were sitting ducks. Veltar stood, frozen in his command center, watching his fleet being systematically destroyed by weapons that his people had considered obsolete. The adaptive shield technology that had made the Zephyrian Empire possible was completely useless against simple kinetic force. Centuries of conquest and technological advancement had been undone by humanity's refusal to abandon basic physics. "All ships, emergency evasive maneuvers," Veltar finally managed to say. "Increase speed and try to get out of range of their projectile weapons." But it was too late. The human ships had found their weakness, and they were pressing their advantage. With ruthless efficiency, the USS Defiant's railgun fired again, this time targeting the shield generators on Veltar's flagship. The tungsten slug tore through the crystalline hull and destroyed the primary barrier emitter in a shower of sparks. Jake Morrison stood on his bridge, watching the alien fleet that had seemed so powerful just minutes before now fleeing in disarray. The Zephyrians had laughed at human bullets, but they weren't laughing anymore. Sometimes the simplest solution was the best solution, and humanity had just reminded the galaxy why they should never be underestimated. "Sir," Amy reported, "enemy fleet is attempting to withdraw. Should we pursue?" Jake considered the question carefully. The immediate threat was over, but he knew this battle was far from finished. Jake Morrison watched the Zephyrian fleet retreat, but he knew better than to think the battle was over. The alien ships were faster and more maneuverable than the human vessels, and their commander would not give up easily. Sure enough, the 7 crystalline warships stopped their retreat at the edge of weapons range and began to regroup. "Captain," Amy Carter reported from her tactical station, "the enemy ships are maintaining distance and moving in evasive patterns. They're trying to stay out of range of our kinetic weapons." Veltar had learned his lesson about underestimating human technology, but he was not ready to admit defeat. The High Commander stood in his damaged control center, studying the tactical display with new respect for his human opponents. His beautiful flagship now had several holes in its hull, and 2 of his escort vessels had been completely destroyed by simple metal projectiles. "Sub-Commander Kethra," Veltar said, his voice tight with controlled anger, "deploy the disruption field generators. If their primitive weapons rely on targeting systems, we will blind them." Kethra activated the new defensive system, and the remaining Zephyrian ships began to release clouds of charged particles into space. The particle clouds were designed to interfere with electronic systems and make it impossible for enemy weapons to lock onto their targets. It was a tactic that had worked against every other species the Zephyrians had encountered aboard the USS Defiant. Rick Thompson watched his sensor displays flicker and fade as the alien jamming field took effect. The particle clouds were disrupting every electronic system on the ship, making it impossible to use computer-guided weapons or even basic targeting scanners. "Captain, we're being jammed. All automated systems are down." Jake nodded grimly. He had expected the aliens to adapt their tactics once they realized their shields were useless. "Amy, switch all weapons to manual control. Tell the gun crews to use visual targeting only." Amy looked surprised. "Sir, manual targeting at this range will be extremely difficult. The accuracy will be terrible." "Maybe," Jake replied, "but humans have been aiming weapons by eye for thousands of years. Let's see if we remember how to do it." The human ships began to change their approach. Instead of relying on computer systems and guided missiles, they switched to unguided projectiles and manual fire control. The gun crews on each vessel used telescopic sights and their own training to aim at the distant alien ships. It was an ancient method of warfare that no advanced civilization had used in centuries. Captain Steve Collins of the USS Ranger understood what Jake was trying to do. His ship was still damaged from the earlier attack, but his crew was determined to fight. "All hands, this is the captain. We're going to fight this battle the old-fashioned way. Gun crews, prepare for manual targeting. Show these aliens what human marksmen can do." The USS Sentinel, with its massive rotary cannons, was particularly well suited for this type of combat. Captain Maria Santos had trained her crew for planetary assault operations, which often required precision shooting under difficult conditions. "Gunnery teams, adjust for enemy speed and distance. Remember your training and trust your instincts." Veltar watched with growing confidence as the human ship struggled to target his vessels through the particle interference. The disruption field was working exactly as designed, making it impossible for the primitive humans to use their electronic systems. "Excellent," he said to Kethra. "Now we can attack them while they are blind." The Zephyrian ships began to move closer, using their superior speed and maneuverability to attack from multiple angles. They had learned not to rely entirely on their shields, but they still believed their advanced technology would give them the advantage. Their plasma weapons were not affected by the particle field, and they could use their own sensors to target. The human vessels dot, but Jake Morrison had one more surprise for the alien commander. Rick, prepare the nuclear-tipped torpedoes. Set them for proximity detonation, not direct impact. Rick's eyes widened. Sir, nuclear weapons at this range could damage our own ships. Not if we use them correctly, Jake replied. These torpedoes don't need to hit their targets directly. We just need to get them close enough. The USS Defiant launched 3 nuclear torpedoes toward the Zephyrian formation. The weapons were completely unguided, following simple ballistic trajectories through space. The alien ships detected the incoming missiles and began evasive maneuvers. Confident that the primitive weapons would miss their targets, they were right about the missiles missing, but they were wrong about the consequences. The nuclear warheads detonated in the middle of the Zephyrian formation, creating massive electromagnetic pulses that disrupted their own jamming systems. The particle clouds dispersed and the human targeting systems came back online. Now, Jake shouted into his communicator, all ships, full attack. Hit them while their jamming is down. The 3 human vessels opened fire with everything they had. Railgun slugs, rotary cannon rounds, and magnetic accelerator projectiles streaked toward the alien ships. The Zephyrians tried to reactivate their disruption fields, but the electromagnetic pulse from the nuclear explosions had temporarily disabled their electronic systems. Amy Carter coordinated the attack with deadly precision. Target the lead ship first. Concentrate all fire on their main hull section. The combined firepower of the human fleet struck Veltar's flagship with devastating effect. Without their shields and jamming systems, the crystalline vessel was vulnerable to every projectile. The beautiful alien ship began to break apart under the relentless barrage of kinetic weapons. Veltar felt his ship shudder as human bullets tore through the hull. Sparks flew from control panels, and several of his officers were thrown to the floor as the vessel lost structural integrity. Emergency power to engines, he commanded. We must withdraw immediately, but the humans were not finished. Captain, Collins had managed to get his damaged ship close enough to use its backup weapons. The USS Ranger fired its emergency kinetic batteries, sending a stream of tungsten pellets toward the fleeing Zephyrian vessels. 2 more alien ships took critical damage and began to drift helplessly through space. Jake watched as the enemy fleet struggled to escape. The aliens had superior technology, but they had made the mistake of fighting humans on human terms. When their advanced systems failed, they had nothing to fall back on. But humanity had learned to adapt and overcome any challenge. Sir, Amy reported, remaining enemy ships are attempting to retreat to hyperspace. Jake made a decision that would determine the outcome of the battle. All ships, pursue and engage. Don't let them regroup and come back with reinforcements. The chase through space became a deadly game of hunter and prey. The 3 human ships pursued the remaining Zephyrian vessels with relentless determination, their crews working frantically to keep up with the faster alien ships. Jake Morrison knew this was their only chance to end the threat before the Zephyrians could escape and return with reinforcements. Rick, I need more power to the engines, Jake called to his chief engineer. Can you give me anything extra? Rick? Thompson was already pushing the ship's systems beyond their normal limits. Sweat dripped from his forehead as he worked to redirect power from non-essential systems to the main drives. I'm giving you everything I can, Captain. But those alien ships are still faster than us. Amy Carter studied her tactical display, looking for any advantage the human ships might have. The Zephyrians were trying to reach the edge of the star system where they could jump to hyperspace and escape. If they succeeded, they would likely return with a much larger fleet to destroy the human colonies in this sector. Captain, Amy said, the enemy ships are maintaining formation even while retreating. They're still thinking like a coordinated fleet instead of individual vessels trying to escape. Jake nodded, understanding what she meant. The Zephyrians were so used to fighting as a unified force that they couldn't break the habit even when fleeing for their lives. That's their weakness. Contact the Ranger and the Sentinel. I have an idea. The 3 human ships spread out in different directions, no longer chasing the aliens directly. Instead, they began to move toward the positions where the Zephyrian fleet would be in several minutes, trying to cut off their escape route. It was a risky strategy that required perfect timing and coordination. Veltar watched the human ships, change course, and felt a moment of confusion. The primitive vessels were no longer following his fleet directly, but seemed to be moving toward empty space. "What are they doing?" he asked Kethra. Kethra studied her own tactical display, trying to understand the human strategy. "Commander, they appear to be trying to intercept our course to the hyperspace jump point. But their ships are too slow to reach the position in time." Veltar nodded, satisfied with his analysis. The humans were desperate and making mistakes. His fleet would reach the jump point long before the human ships could intercept them. "Maintain course and speed. We will escape this system and return with enough ships to destroy these troublesome humans." But Jake Morrison had not survived 20 years in space by making simple mistakes. The human ships were not trying to intercept the Zephyrian fleet directly. Instead, they were moving to positions where they could create overlapping fields of fire, forcing the alien ships to choose between different dangerous paths. "Amy, I need you to calculate the exact moment when the enemy ships will be closest to our projected positions," Jake said. "We'll only get one shot at this." Amy worked quickly, using her tactical computer to predict the enemy movements. The Zephyrian ships were fast, but they were following a predictable course toward the hyperspace jump point. "Captain, in approximately 4 minutes, the lead ship will pass within range of our railgun. The other ships will follow at 15-second intervals." Jake activated his communicator. "Steve, Maria, this is Jake. In 4 minutes, we execute a coordinated strike. Each ship targets a different enemy vessel. We fire everything we have at the same time." Captain Collins responded immediately. "Understood, Jake. The Ranger is ready." "Captain," Santos confirmed from the Sentinel, "we're locked and loaded. Those aliens won't know what hit them." The next few minutes felt like hours as the human ships moved into position. The crews worked in tense silence, knowing that this would be their last chance to stop the Zephyrian fleet. If they failed, the aliens would escape and return with enough firepower to destroy every human colony in the sector. Veltar's flagship was the first to enter the human trap. The beautiful crystalline ship was moving at maximum speed, its commander confident that he was about to escape. The other Zephyrian vessels followed in perfect formation, just as Amy had predicted. "Fire," Jake commanded. The USS Defiance railgun fired its most powerful shot yet, launching a tungsten slug at tremendous velocity toward Veltar's flagship. At the same moment, the USS Ranger fired its magnetic accelerator, and the USS Sentinel unleashed a devastating barrage from its rotary cannons. The three human ships had coordinated their attack perfectly, creating a wall of metal projectiles that the alien ships could not avoid. Veltar's ship was the first to be hit. The railgun slug struck the vessel's main hull section, tearing through the crystalline structure and causing massive internal damage. The beautiful ship began to break apart as secondary explosions ripped through its interior. Veltar felt his command center shake violently as systems failed all around him. "Emergency evacuation," Veltar shouted to his crew. "All hands to the escape pods." But there was no time for an orderly evacuation. The USS Sentinel's rotary cannons were still firing, sending thousands of depleted uranium rounds toward the dying ship. Each bullet that struck the hull caused more damage, and the vessel's exotic matter reactor began to go critical. The second Zephyrian ship tried to change course to avoid the human weapons, but it was too late. The USS Ranger's magnetic accelerator fired again, this time targeting the ship's engine section. The steel core projectile punched through the alien hull and destroyed the main propulsion system. The ship began to drift helplessly through space, its crew trapped aboard a dying vessel. Kethra had managed to transfer to one of the remaining ships, but she could only watch in horror as her commander's flagship exploded in a brilliant flash of light. The exotic matter reactor had finally reached critical mass, creating an explosion that could be seen throughout the star system. "Commander Veltar is dead," she reported to the surviving ship captains. "We are the only vessels left." The remaining three Zephyrian ships were now in full retreat, their formation broken and their morale shattered. The humans had destroyed 4 of their 7 vessels using nothing but primitive kinetic weapons. The mighty Zephyrian fleet that had conquered 17 star systems was being defeated by bullets and metal slugs. Jake Morrison stood on his bridge, watching the alien ships flee toward the edge of the system. The immediate threat was over, but he knew the battle was not finished. There were still 3 enemy vessels left, and they would surely try to escape and bring reinforcements. Amy, can we catch the remaining ships before they reach the jump point? Jake asked. Amy checked her calculations. It will be close, Captain. We might be able to intercept 1 or 2 of them, but the others will likely escape. Jake made a decision that would determine the final outcome of the battle. Oh. Ships, maximum pursuit. We end this here and now? The final chase lasted only minutes, but it felt like an eternity to the crews of both fleets. The 3 remaining Zephyrian ships pushed their engines to maximum power, desperately trying to reach the hyperspace jump point before the human vessels could catch them. Behind them, the USS Defiant, USS Ranger, and USS Sentinel pursued with grim determination, their crews knowing that this was their last chance to end the threat. Sub-Commander Kethra had taken command of the surviving Zephyrian forces after Veltar's death. She stood in the control center of her ship, watching the distance to the jump point slowly decrease on her display screen. The humans were gaining on them, but slowly. If her calculations were correct, they would reach safety with only minutes to spare. Commander, her navigation officer reported, we will reach the jump point in approximately 6 minutes. The human ships will be within weapons range in 7 minutes. Kethra nodded, feeling a mixture of relief and shame. Relief that she might escape to fight another day, and shame that the mighty Zephyrian fleet had been defeated by such primitive weapons. She would have to report to the High Command that their invincible shields were useless against simple kinetic attacks. Aboard the USS Defiant, Jake Morrison studied the tactical display with growing frustration. The alien ships were just fast enough to stay ahead of his fleet, and they would reach the jump point before he could stop them. Once they escaped, they would return with reinforcements, and humanity would face a much larger and more prepared enemy. Captain, Amy Carter said from her station, I'm detecting something unusual. The alien ships are having to reduce power to their weapon systems to maintain maximum engine speed. They're vulnerable right now. Jake felt a spark of hope. How vulnerable? Their rear shields are operating at minimum power, and their point defense systems are offline. If we could get close enough for a long-range shot, Jake turned to Rick Thompson. Rick, I need you to give me everything the ship has. Redirect power from life support, artificial gravity, everything non-essential. I want maximum power to the railgun. Rick's face went pale. Captain, that will leave us with barely enough power to maintain basic systems. If the shot misses, we'll be defenseless. If we don't take the shot, we'll be dead anyway when they come back with reinforcements, Jake replied. Do it! The USS Defiant began to slow as power was redirected from the engines to the main railgun. The ship's lights dimmed, and the artificial gravity fluctuated as Rick pushed the vessel beyond its design limits. The railgun began to charge, building up more power than it had ever held before. Amy, I need the most accurate targeting solution you can give me, Jake ordered. We'll only get one shot at this. Amy worked frantically at her console, calculating the exact trajectory needed to hit a target that was moving at tremendous speed toward the edge of the star system. The mathematics were incredibly complex, requiring her to predict not only where the enemy ship would be when the projectile reached it, but also how the alien vessel might change course in response to the attack. Captain, I have a solution, Amy finally announced, but the target is at extreme range. Even with maximum power, the chances of a hit are less than 30%. Jake considered the odds. 30% was not good, but it was better than 0. Take the shot. The USS Defiant's railgun fired with more power than ever before. The tungsten slug accelerated to incredible velocity, streaking across space toward the lead Zephyrian ship. The projectile was invisible to the naked eye, but its passage created a brief trail of ionized particles that glowed briefly in the darkness. Kethra was watching the countdown to the jump point when her ship suddenly shuddered. Alarms began to sound throughout the vessel, and her officers called out damage reports from their stations. The human projectile struck her ship's engine section, causing massive damage to the propulsion system. "Engine power is down to 40%, her chief engineer reported. "We're losing speed rapidly." Kethra felt her heart sink as she realized what this meant. Her ship was no longer fast enough to reach the jump point before the human vessels. Caught up, the other two Zephyrian ships were still accelerating toward safety, but they would have to leave her behind. "Continue to the jump point," she ordered the other ship commanders. "Do not wait for us. Report to High Command that the humans have weapons that can penetrate our shields." The USS Defiant and its companion ships closed in on the damaged alien vessel. Kethra's ship was still dangerous, but it was no longer able to escape. The other two Zephyrian ships reached the jump point and disappeared into hyperspace. Carrying news of the battle back to their home territory, Jake Morrison stood on his bridge, watching the final enemy ship through the main view screen. The beautiful crystalline vessel was drifting slowly through space, its engines damaged beyond repair. He could have destroyed it easily, but something made him hesitate. "Open a channel to the alien ship," Jake ordered. Lisa Rodriguez worked at her communications console. "Channel open, Captain." "This is Captain Jake Morrison of the human fleet," Jake said, his voice calm and professional. "Your ship is disabled and your fleet has abandoned you. I'm offering you the chance to surrender." There was a long pause before Kethra responded. "I am Sub-Commander Kethra of the Zephyrian Imperial Fleet. Why do you offer mercy to an enemy? Who would have shown you none?" Jake considered the question carefully. "Because that's what separates us from you. We don't wage war for conquest or glory. We fight to protect our people and our way of life. Your commander is dead, your ships are destroyed, and your invasion has failed. There's no point in more killing." Kethra looked around at her damaged ship and her frightened crew. The humans had defeated them using weapons that her people considered primitive, but they were showing a mercy that the Zephyrian Empire had never known. "What would happen to my crew if we surrender?" "You'll be treated as prisoners of war according to human law," Jake replied. "Your wounded will receive medical care, and you'll be returned to your people when this conflict is resolved." After a long moment, Kethra made her decision. "Very well, Captain Morrison. I surrender my ship and my crew to you." Jake felt a mixture of relief and sadness as he watched the alien vessel power down its weapons. The battle was over, but he knew this was just the beginning. The two surviving Zephyrian ships would report back to their empire, and humanity would soon face a much larger enemy force. "Amy, send a message to Fleet Command," Jake ordered. "Tell them we've encountered a hostile alien empire with advanced technology. They'll be back and we need to be ready." As the USS Defiant took the surrendered alien ship into custody, Jake Morrison reflected on the battle they had just fought. The Zephyrians had laughed at human bullets, dismissing them as primitive relics of a barbaric past. But in the end, it wasn't the sophistication of their shields that had mattered. It was the effectiveness of humanity's simple, direct approach to solving problems. The galaxy was about to learn that humans might not have the most advanced technology, but they had something far more valuable. They had the ability to adapt, to think creatively, and to find solutions that no one else had considered. Sometimes the best answer to a complex problem was the one that had been staring you in the face all along.